In the small town of Fairview, Illinois, a community of approximately 5,000 people, a terrible crime began to unfold without anyone suspecting. Mary Thompson, a 58-year-old woman known by everyone as a loving and dedicated mother, was about to reveal a dark side that no one could have imagined. Mary had two adult children, David, 32, and Sarah, 28. From a young age, Mary had always been overprotective, especially with David. When he married Lisa 5 years earlier, Mary couldn't accept the idea of another woman occupying the place she believed was exclusively hers. David and Lisa seemed like the perfect couple. They met in college and quickly fell in love. David worked as a manager at a hardware store, while Lisa was a dedicated elementary school teacher. They had a comfortable home and were well-liked in the community. However, Mary's constant presence in the couple's life was beginning to cause problems. Mary never hid her disapproval of Lisa. She thought Lisa wasn't good enough for David and often made subtle but venomous comments that undermined Lisa's confidence. At first, David defended his wife, but Mary's persistence began to affect him. She was a master of emotional manipulation, using her influence over David to sow doubt and insecurity. During family gatherings, Mary always found a way to criticize Lisa, whether it was for the way she kept the house or her career choices. Lisa tried to keep the peace, but the constant disapproval was starting to affect her marriage. David, on the other hand, found himself increasingly torn between loyalty to his mother and love for his wife. As the months passed, Mary intensified her campaign against Lisa. She began making unexpected visits to the couple's home, offering unsolicited help and getting involved in every aspect of their lives. David, tired and confused, started to feel suffocated by his mother's constant pressure. And so, on that fateful night of March 15, 2015, the seed of Mary's macabre plan began to germinate. In an apparently innocent conversation with David, Mary suggested that Lisa might not be faithful to him. She subtly implied that Lisa might have hidden intentions and wasn't as dedicated as she seemed. David, already weakened by his mother's constant manipulation, began to believe Mary's insinuations. From that moment on, David and Lisa's relationship began to crumble. David, increasingly paranoid, started watching Lisa's every move, looking for evidence of a non-existent affair. Lisa, noticing the change in her husband's behavior, tried to talk to him, but David was irrevocably influenced by his mother's poisonous words. What started as simple distrust soon turned into a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Mary, determined to regain control over her son's life, was willing to do anything to get rid of Lisa once and for all. And David, trapped in his mother's web of manipulation, was about to commit an act that would change their lives forever. As days passed in Fairview, the tension in David and Lisa Thompson's house grew by the moment. Mary Thompson, always astute and manipulative, was ready to put her dark plan into action. She knew she needed more than simple insinuations to make David act. She needed to convince him that Lisa was a real threat, and that the only solution was to eliminate her. Mary began visiting David more frequently, always finding ways to plant new doubts in his mind. "David, I saw Lisa talking to that man on the street. She was smiling a lot. I think they're more than just friends," Mary would say with a tone of fake concern. These small lies began to erode David's sanity, who was already emotionally exhausted by his mother's constant manipulation. One night in April, Mary decided it was time to intensify the plan. She invited David to dinner at her house, where, amidst trivial conversations, she began to plant the idea that Lisa was not only cheating on him but also planning to leave him. "David, can't you see? Lisa is using you. She's going to abandon you and take everything you have," Mary said, her voice laden with false despair. David, who had always blindly trusted his mother, began to see Lisa as an enemy. The paranoia grew every day, and he started obsessively monitoring Lisa, checking her phone, following her when she went out, and constantly questioning her about her actions. Lisa, increasingly distressed, tried to explain the situation to David, but her attempts were futile in the face of the poison Mary injected daily. Then, on a rainy April night, Mary made the final move. During a conversation filled with insinuations and false concerns, she suggested a definitive solution. "David, you know I only want what's best for you. I can't bear to see you suffer like this. Sometimes, we have to do hard things to protect those we love," Mary said. looking into David's eyes with an expression of false compassion. David, already completely subdued by his mother's manipulation, looked at her for guidance. "What do you mean, Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling with anxiety. Mary sighed deeply, as if she were reluctant to share her plan. "David, you need to get rid of her. It's the only way to protect our family. If Lisa isn't here anymore, you can have peace again," she said, softly but firmly. The idea initially shocked David, but as Mary continued to speak, he began to see the twisted logic in her words. "You're right, Mom. I need to do this," he finally agreed, his voice full of resignation. Mary, satisfied with the turn of events, hugged David. "I'll be with you every step of the way, my son. We'll get through this together," she assured, sealing the dark pact between them. With the plan set and David's mind completely poisoned, Lisa's fate was sealed. What began as suspicion and manipulation was about to culminate in a tragedy that would shake Fairview forever. The summer heat was intensifying in Fairview, and the atmosphere in the Thompson house was laden with palpable tension. Mary's plan was about to come to fruition, and David was about to commit the act that would change their lives forever. June 5, 2015, would be a landmark in the dark history of their family. That morning, David and Lisa had planned to spend the day together. It was a rare day off for both of them, and they intended to relax and reconnect. Lisa, eager to ease the tension and improve their relationship, prepared a special lunch for David. She had planned a peaceful day, unaware that she was about to face a terrible tragedy. While Lisa was busy in the kitchen, David was in a state of growing agitation. Mary's words still echoed in his mind, and the idea of eliminating Lisa seemed increasingly justified. He forced himself to act normally, trying to maintain composure while planning the unthinkable act. Lunch was served around noon, and the couple sat at the table. Their conversation was strained, with David trying to appear as normal as possible, while Lisa tried to smooth over the tension. The afternoon continued to be hot, and David, increasingly restless, struggled against the growing urge to carry out the plan. As the sun began to set, David knew the moment was approaching. Lisa was in the living room, grading students' papers while David headed to the kitchen. He had prepared for what he was about to do, taking a sharp knife he had hidden in the back of the drawer. David hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at the knife, then at the living room door where Lisa was unaware. Guilt and fear mixed in his mind, but his mother's influence and the paranoia he had cultivated were stronger than ever. Finally, David gathered his courage and walked to the living room. Lisa was facing away from him, focused on her work. Without making a sound, David slowly approached. The knife was in his hand, sweat trickling down his face as he prepared for the unthinkable act. With a quick and desperate movement, David attacked Lisa. Surprise and panic filled Lisa's face as she tried to defend herself. She screamed for help, but the screams were muffled by the sudden violence. David, with trembling hands and a racing heart, continued the attack, his actions becoming a series of automatic movements as his brain struggled to cope with the reality of what he was doing. The confrontation was brutal and swift. Lisa tried to fight back, but the wounds were severe, and her strength was rapidly diminishing. Within minutes, the living room was stained with the blood and chaos of the tragedy. Lisa collapsed to the floor, unconscious and gravely wounded. David, now in a state of shock, looked at his wife's body. The reality of what he had done began to set in, and he found himself paralyzed by guilt and horror. He knew there was no turning back and that the act was complete. David fell to his knees, crying and questioning what had led him to this situation. With oppressive silence filling the room, the only thing left was the certainty that the tragedy had occurred. David, now completely devastated and remorseful, knew that life as he knew it was irreparably destroyed. Mary's plan had achieved its macabre objective, and Lisa's fate was sealed. The small town of Fairview would never be the same. The dawn of June 6th brought a sense of unease to the town of Fairview. The tragedy that had occurred at the Thompson house quickly spread, shocking the community and leaving everyone stunned. David Thompson's brutal crime against his wife, Lisa, had been discovered, and the consequences began to unfold devastatingly. The morning after the murder, David, still in shock and unable to cope with the guilt and despair, decided to call the police. He could no longer bear the weight of what he had done. When the officers arrived at the house, they found David in a disordered state, sitting next to Lisa's body, with a vacant and guilty expression. The scene the police found was horrific. The living room was covered in blood, and Lisa's body lay on the floor, lifeless. David was immediately arrested and taken to the station for questioning. The news of the murder shocked Fairview residents, who could never have imagined such a terrible crime happening in their small community. During the interrogation, David revealed the truth about his mother's manipulation. He told the investigators about the frequent conversations with Mary, how she had planted doubts in his mind and convinced him that Lisa was a threat. David explained how Mary had pressured and manipulated him into committing the crime, revealing the depth of her influence over him. The police then sought out Mary, who was at her home, apparently unaware of what had happened. When the officers interrogated her, she initially tried to present herself as a concerned mother. But as the evidence mounted and inconsistencies in her stories appeared, Mary began to contradict herself. She was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and was taken into custody. The trial of David and Mary began a few months later. The case attracted media attention, and the courtroom was filled with people who wanted to witness the outcome of the crime that had shaken the town. David, devastated and remorseful, confessed his guilt and cooperated with the prosecution. The evidence of his guilt was irrefutable, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Mary, in turn, faced a separate trial. The court heard witnesses and examined correspondence between mother and son, clearly revealing the manipulation and incitement to crime. The prosecution proved that Mary had instigated David and done everything in her power to convince him that killing Lisa was the only solution. Mary was sentenced to 25 years in prison for conspiracy and incitement to murder. The case left a deep mark on Fairview. The community mourned Lisa's loss and was shocked by Mary's role in the crime. The neighborhood where the Thompsons lived was never the same. The tragedy served as a grim reminder of the destructive power of manipulation and the devastating consequences that can result when someone allows hatred and control to govern their actions. The days and weeks that followed were filled with discussions and debates about the case. The town united to support Lisa's family and to try to find some closure in the face of the horror that had occurred. The shocking crime committed by David and Mary's manipulation was a brutal reminder that evil can lurk beneath the surface of the most ordinary lives, and the small town of Fairview was forced to confront the reality of an unimaginable tragedy.